see you all. All right, well, we'll begin as usual with our 24 minutes of meditation, because 25 minutes is just too much. So I invite everybody to just get comfortable, relaxed, and we'll just do a nice little guided shamatha meditation. We'll set our motivation at the start, and I'll guide us there. Let the bell just be an invitation. An invitation to let your awareness descend into your body. Just simply become aware of your body. Allowing your awareness to just rest, settle in whatever feels solid about your body. Often a good place to start is where you come in contact with a chair, a cushion, the floor. The body feels very solid there. And then just expand your awareness, resting it in the solidity of your body. Now I invite you to take a little time to establish your refuge and cultivate bodhicitta. For those of you without such a practice, I invite you to just take a moment to set a really good motivation for being here. Suggest maybe a motivation that includes being a benefit to all sentient beings. And now let's just take a little time to do a short body scan, relaxing and releasing any tension in our bodies that we may have from the day. So I invite you to bring your awareness right up to the crown of your head, right up to the top, and just rest it there for a moment. And from here we'll just slowly scan down, relaxing and releasing any tension that we come upon. So I invite you to think of your awareness as a soothing balm of awareness. A soothing balm that just melts away any tension it comes upon. So let that awareness flow from the crown of your head across your forehead as far as your eyes, relaxing and releasing any tension in your forehead, softening the muscles around the eyes. Now let that soothing balm of awareness flow from the eyes down as far as your chin, relaxing your cheeks, relaxing your jaw, softening your lips. Let that awareness flow down into your neck and into your shoulders. And from your left shoulder, let that soothing balm of awareness flow down your left arm all the way to your fingertips. And from your right shoulder, down your right arm, all the way to your fingertips. Now bring your awareness into your upper torso and let it flow from your shoulders down to your waist, relaxing your shoulders and back, chest. And from your waist, let your awareness flow down your left leg all the way to your toes. And now all the way down your right leg to your toes. Let your awareness expand throughout your whole body. Just take a moment to check in. Is there any tension? If so, just breathe into it, relax it. Exhale and release. Let each in-breath be an invitation to relax, and each out-breath an opportunity to let go, letting go of any tension, worries, or concerns. Nowhere to go, nowhere to be. And when you're ready, with a body that's relaxed and a mind that's alert, and bring all of your awareness to the sensations of the breath. Let your breath be natural, unmodified, and simply be a witness, a keen witness to the sensations that arise with each breath that enters and exits your body. If your mind wanders, no problem. Just relax. Release the thoughts and return to the breath. Each breath, a new moment and a new opportunity. worries, no worries. Nice to transition smoothly, gently. All right. So we're, believe it or not, still in the third point of the 7-point mind training. And as perusing, I think we might still be there for a bit. Kali Kali. Slowly, slowly. And it's a very poignant point that we're on now. You know, given the current situation of the country and the feelings that are arising, we have just completed the... so this category of the third step is transforming adversity onto the path. It's really the core of mind training, is that challenges, difficulties, adversities are actually that opportunity of greatest potential to transform ourselves to a path of awakening. And the real gift of a mind training practice is that my current practice is how I'm engaging in my life. It's not I'm at a monastery somewhere, I'm spending 12 hours a day, or I'm in retreat, or that in this lifestyle that we have, this very turbulent and hustle and bustle, as my teachers got, hustle and bustle day, that's my practice. I can bring and transform daily life into a path of awakening, into an awakened mind. And so it's a hardcore practice, as we've gotten to. There's some foundational things that are critically important. And the piece to that is, with a good context, we can really brace ourselves to make our daily life a real meaningful opportunity to transform ourselves. This particular point that we're on has subpoints, and the last one was blame all things on one. And so that one thing, the real source of mental and emotional suffering, the one thing, is my self-cherishing attitude. So it gets me into trouble. So we spent, 3 or 4 weeks trying to examine that. Is that true? Does that make sense? Nothing in here is to be taken without a critical mind and testing. It's hard to get anywhere if you just take things on blind faith. You're not going to have any oomph. You're not going to lean into things. It needs to make sense. It needs to add up, and we need to be able to put it into practice. So we spent some time noticing, is there a time in my life with the mental and emotionally, mentally afflicted states that arise when it's not self-concerned in some way, the way I want it to be, the way I think it should be, the things I had planned, and in some way having my thoughts and views higher than others. So we've been exploring that idea and really starting to notice that these really do arise from really focusing on me and not we. And what a shift that is when it's we. A we-centered life, that this is what's happening right now, what's the healthiest thing to do for the most amount of people, or other beings, whether it's animals or what's going on. If I were to live my life asking that question, given the situations arising, how can I be most helpful? Would that eliminate some suffering? As opposed to, with everything that's arising, how can it benefit me and my kids and the way I want to live and the job I get and where I park my car and the kind of car I want and how I think it should be? Because when you start to notice stress, worries, fears, anxieties, anxiety can only arise from self-cherishing, right? Because what would we be anxious about? John and John's family and the way John wants it to be. And yet, it's a very pervasive delusion that if other things were different, I would not have these mental and emotional afflictions. And yet mental and emotional afflictions reside where? In my consciousness. They don't reside out there. So it's a tricky business. Because it really looks like you're the cause of my anger. Or possibly a political figure, which will remain nameless, is the cause of my anger. But anger is a mental state. It resides in my mind and in my consciousness. The seeds of anger are there, not out there. Events that I come in contact with can be triggering conditions that give rise to anger. But anger is here, it's not out there. And then my projection on how I perceive and label them has much more to do with the conditions that's going to give rise to anger. And that misperception is usually the case, not an accurate perception, which again gives rise. So everything in Buddhism is always focused on what is true. And the fundamental working hypothesis is that all of my mental and emotional suffering comes from misperception, from not living in reality. And everything is about learning to live in reality. That's a good working hypothesis. It's something that's testable. It's something we can check into. One of the points here will be to test our practice. And so to venture into this next piece, it's important to know that my anger, resentment, jealousy, frustrations are self-arising. They arise in dependence upon other things, people, places. But the seeds are here, right? No seed of anger can't be anger. And so we've talked about that analogy that the cause of something is the same stuff, right? So the cause for a tree is the seed that gives rise to a tree. It's the same stuff. It's a seed, then becomes a sprout, then it becomes a tree, then it becomes leaves. But the wind, the air, the soil, those are not the cause for the tree. Those are the conditions. No seed, doesn't matter how much soil you have, water, any of that. So that's the analogy to bear in mind as we work with mental and emotional afflictions, that actual causes are of the same stuff. So of mental activity, mental stuff, that resides in my consciousness. Outer conditions trigger those seeds, give rise to things, and then the anger and frustration and stuff arises. And so, we've talked about that. We've practiced it. We're coming to this point, and we're starting to realize that. And so the point of blaming all things on one is to know that the real cause of mental and emotional suffering arises within me, not out there. Doesn't mean that out there doesn't matter. That's a different thing. It's saying that that's not the ultimate cause. It is a condition that interdependently arises, right? So, for example, if I think about someone, I'm going to give an analogy here. If we read about someone that killed somebody, right? Drunk driving. A friend of ours, maybe. A friend of ours died because of a drunk driver. And we find out that this drunk driver, maybe had done it before, had got tickets, had gotten drunk, and had killed my friend. A friend of mine not too long ago had posted that a person who killed her sister drunk driving was having a parole hearing and was maybe getting released, and invited all of her friends to write letters to say, don't release them. Does not deserve that. He took my daughter's life. And so you could see where that's we could easily sympathize with that. Go, yeah, why should that person be able to walk free? And then we ask ourselves, well, is that really what's beneficial? I mean, is this person who drove drunk a bad person? And then the bigger question Has anybody in this room or online, have you ever driven drunk? Could it have happened to you? Have we ever texted while driving? Have we done things that are irresponsible? None of that really comes to mind when we easily point a blame that, yeah, this person killed a person and they deserve to be in prison for the rest of their life. So I bring this up because today someone posted something on my Facebook. I had shared a story of a close personal friend of mine in my book that killed a whole family. So he killed a family of people drunk driving. And is he a bad person or a good person? Is he someone we should lock away forever? I met him shortly after that. I met him. He was a young man. I was a young man. We were both young. We were young ones. And he had about a year of recovery. He had had damage done in that. He doesn't even remember the thing that happened. He had been paralyzed, and so a long month they didn't know if he'd walk again or any of that. And he did. He came back, and he got sober. He went through treatment, and that's when I got to know him, and we became dear friends. And then he went to prison, and then he got out of prison, and we moved in together. And he rode a bicycle because he couldn't have a license. He rode a bicycle and he went to school. And he kept going to school. He has a couple of master's degrees, PhD now. And he spent somewhere between 15 and 20 years devoting his life to helping people and working in hospice care, helping families prepare for transition. He's one of the most loving, kind, nurturing people I've ever met in my life. He is literally my best friend. Is he a bad person or a good person? Is any one of us a bad person or a good person? We forget all these things when we label somebody and they become that thing. I bring this up today because today it was shared on my Facebook post that somebody had read that in the book and they posted it to a friend who was struggling because a friend had died in a drunk driving crash. And that person responded on my Facebook page today and they said, thank you to the person who posted it, not to me, so much for sharing this. My friend died as a result of drunk driving, and this helped me heal and recognize the value in another person. These are things that are just true. But we don't often dwell in truth. We just label people. They're a drunk driver. Is that what they are? Are they a single working mom? Raising 3 kids, working 2 jobs? That one night went out and, was trying to find some stress relief? Were they someone who's perpetually drunk? Were they what? Were they someone's mother, child, son, aunt, uncle, like ours? In what ways were they like me? Someone who's trying to find their way, do the best they can. And have they done things that were good? And have they let people down? Yeah. And who hasn't? Who hasn't? And who we are we not a compilation of whether I was raised by a nurturing environment or a challenging environment? Was I someone raised with insecurity and fear and a lack of self-worth because of how I grew up? Was I seeking some way to find some sense of self that's worthy and not worthy? And isn't everybody else? product of their environment, their culture, their upbringing, their fears, their insecurities that arise in relation to the experiences they've had, the opportunities or lack of opportunities they've had. Everyone we meet, just like me, has known sadness and despair. Everyone we meet, just like me, is trying to find some happiness, trying to avoid suffering. Everyone, just like me, are trying to get their needs met. They're trying to learn how to live. But when I'm the center of the universe, they're in my way. And they're not just like me. It's me and it's them. Or it's us and it's them. And these labels that we apply can never capture who someone is. Nor can any label capture me. You know? Not long ago, I was a customer in the Ace Hardware store, just like anybody else. You know? Sitting here as a Buddhist teacher at the moment. Things change, moment to moment. So living in this thing that we call reality, we recognize that there's an interdependence to all things and everything that we're perceiving, and it's always a subjective experience. And the way I'm receiving it and taking it in is always through a lens of my own subjective experience of ego, of self, of what we would say in Buddhism, karma and klesha. And as I change, guess what changes? Everything else that I experience, because I experience it differently. So I told you a story where I could have gotten on a bandwagon about how drunk drivers shouldn't get out of prison. And I tell another story about how someone is probably one of the most caring people I ever met that did the same thing, actually worked. What am I paying attention to? What's true and what label am I sticking on something, someone? And does that hold up? But all this happens in a nanosecond. The label goes on. And as soon as we stick the label on, well, that's what they are. And now I react to that. And they don't change. I mean, how many people did something wrong to us some time ago? And every time we think about them, they're frozen in time, and they're that jerk that did this. Stays that way, as though they could have never changed, as though that one event is who they are. And then anything that that person did, had we done something similar? And are we that one thing we did? What are we paying attention to? What about dear friends, you know? Those dear friends that we've had that nursed us, that were there for us, that fed us, that have been kind to us. And then we find out something they did. Maybe they stole $20 from me. They're not my friend. They stole money from me. They're a thief. That's what they are. They're not the 100 nice things they did, or all the dinners they bought me, or all the things we did together. They're that jerk who stole $20 from me. So this is important as we engage in this next step, because it's asking us to go very deeply in this next. If we really want to cut at that self-cherishing that separates me from you, that is the basis of transactional relationships that create suffering and division and confusion and misperception. It's really asking us to really see all others as even more valuable than us. And not because we're not valuable, just because there's more of you than me. There's a lot more. What do I do for the greater good? And we have this turbulent time that's arising in our country. And it's really easy to watch the news or to do things and get really worked up. I mean, I catch myself just wondering how much longer this can happen. It's almost like each day I expect it's got to by now, you know. And I notice that in my mind. And I also know, though, that, the people that we label there, they're not the core root of the problem. They're the symptom. The core root of the problem is really a lack of shared respect and value that we have with each other, and how we engage in the world, and how we talk to each other, and how we perceive ourselves and others. And in this next step here, we need to meditate on great kindness for everyone. And he goes right to the ones that we label enemies first. That they are our practice. And it's really hard to do that in a superficial way. I mean, it's easy to do it in a superficial way. It's hard to do it in a nonsense. I actually really mean it. And so I'm prefacing this with a way that could make sense, that could be helpful to how we interact with each other. It could actually improve the world we live in. And, for the record, we're in a pretty liberal place here. And so many people are a pretty liberal town. I travel and I teach, and I have friends that are very much conservative, very extremely conservative. And they have housed me and fed me and politically are on a very different perspective than I find myself on. And they're intelligent. And they're kind. And they've fed me. And they fed me when I was a monk. They've housed monks in their house, Buddhist monks. And they donated money to help people. And they help with the United Way. And they even have me come out and speak at their Rotary clubs and things. And we hug each other. And we talk about compassion and kindness. And that's possible because we can recognize that we're human beings and that we value each other, even though we have different perspectives. I find that quite remarkable, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to go visit there when it happens. So as we, really look at the challenges of our time, is what do we really want? Do I want to be angry? Do I want my country to be filled with hate? Do I want division? Or do I want my grandchildren to grow up in a place where people recognize the value of each other? And they're genuinely concerned about the environment that we live in, and that people have opportunities, and that we can really expound a way of living together that's based in love and compassion and wisdom. So for me, that's kind of what I would like. I'd like my granddaughters to grow up that way, to know that way. And so if I would like that to happen, I don't think hatred and anger is gonna get that. What I do think might get there is skillfully engaging in this world in ways that are compassionate and kind. And skillful is the word, because compassion does not mean I'm a doormat. Nothing compassionate about being a doormat. There's nothing or loving and kind about being a doormat. When we look at people who have faced similar things, Nelson Mandela, for example, 27 years in prison. 27 years in prison. And he made friends with his guards. And they sat in his front row and he became president. Some things just don't make sense initially, right? We sit there and we can't imagine how we can change things. Who would have guessed that somebody 27 years in prison would become the president of a country that was dominated by white racist views? Didn't see that coming, Things change. And if we look at just our current environment, it's easy to get caught up sometimes in those labels. And those people are like that, and this person's like that, and I'm like this, and there's us, and there's them, and they're destroying, whatever it is that we have. And project a really sense of hopelessness and despair in the future, and again caught up in a confusion labeling that if we were to look back 60 years in our country, how far have we come? There were states 60 years ago in our country that you couldn't be married to someone outside of your own race. We sometimes forget that there's a huge amount of progress. And what we take for granted today was something that was really created out of a lot of effort and energy. And so that we have this trajectory, and that through those times and that we're really, you can hang somebody in your own front yard and mistreat people, just as though they were not human at all. Happened in our country not long ago. And look at how, when I was a Buddhist monk, I could travel in the South and wear Buddhist robes, and people invite you in their home, and we talk about compassion. So there's an incredible amount of progress and opportunity that is here. And so collectively paying attention to that is, if we want to continue, and this is all worldly stuff, I haven't even got to the mind of awakening, but I like to start at a practical level, and then that we're very tangible, and not to say enlightenment's not practical, but that's something we can stick our toe in, so we can engage these practices that really have liberation from even sticking those labels on in the first place. And so here, this idea that number one is I need to recognize the value of others. If I'm going to meditate loving kindness on them, for them, wishing them happiness and well-being, I'm going to first need to recognize that they're just like me. That's the starting point. They're just like me. And what they're doing actually makes sense to them from their point of view, and the way that they are raised, and the environment that they're raised in, the conditioning they've had, and so forth, and all the things that have given rise. And if I can recognize the value in others, I can talk to them. And we can find common ground, and we can work on how to skillfully engage in this precious human life, and how we can have a mind of compassion, loving kindness. But it really starts with finding a way to see that value in others, and knowing that the things they do are not who they are. And it's much more effective to deal with the harmful things people are doing when we deal with the things that they're doing rather than the person they are. Because then it's not personal. It's someone that is, from a Buddhist perspective, to really start to understand how do we build this sense of empathy and care and concern for people doing harm. Well, imagine what kind of pain they're in. Imagine what kind of peace they've ever known in their life. From a Buddhist perspective, imagine the karma and the torment of many of lifetimes that can happen. We've talked about it before in here, but His Holiness, speaking to just a monk that he came across in his garden who had, spent years in prison and had been tortured, for something like 20 years. His comment, His Holiness said, it must have been dangerous in there. And the monk said, it was very dangerous. I almost lost compassion for the people torturing me. That was the real danger. He did not want lose his bodhicitta. He did not want to lose that. And when he recognized, imagined the torment and pain of someone who inflicts that kind of harm on a daily basis, what kind of, trajectory of lifetimes is that going to do? Let alone in this lifetime, how much joy and happiness do they ever experience? So that's a good starting point, that people tend to share what they have. People don't wake up and be angry, miserable jerks on purpose. They do things that are miserable and angry and jerk-like because of their own struggles and sufferings and their own torments. And so when we want to meditate for loving kindness from them, what we really want is for them to not suffer so much. And if they did not suffer so much, guess what they wouldn't be doing? Harming others. So it becomes a very productive way of wishing the best for others, because when others have their fundamental needs met, have worthiness and value, have contentment, self-worth, inner peace, they're no longer in competition with others, and they're not out trying to harm others and compete with others, and they're not looking to do things to build themselves up. So if you understand how it actually works, we can address the real problem. And wouldn't it be nice if people recognize their own inner value and worthiness? And so when we wish loving kindness on someone, that's what we're really wishing. What can we do to help people recognize that value so they stop feeling so angry, hurtful? Compassion, same way. I don't want people to suffer. If they suffered less, they wouldn't be out doing this. Now, this is not scientifically proven, but it's my own analysis. So I'll get out of this thing. But I like to say it. I've never actually met a human being that doesn't want to be a good human being. Just haven't. Now, I've met some people who have killed people. As some of you know, many of my friends have spent quite a bit of time in penitentiaries. And matter of fact, next month I'll be sitting with 40 men in recovery in New York that have done incredible harm. And not one of them, or anyone I've ever met, ever did not want to really be a good person deep down. I'll sit with these men, as we do every 6 months, 40 in September, about 75 to 100 in others. And one guy came to the retreat last year. He said, I always ask why you're here. Big old guy. He said, I'm here because I want to learn how to cry. He hadn't cried in years. He just want to learn how to cry. Now, that's not the label we stick on him. And by the way, he cried a lot before we were done. Nobody wants to be a terrible human being. And that's just a fundamental starting point that I find valuable. And again, not scientifically proven. There's 7 billion. I haven't run around and met everybody. But I have met quite a few people in almost 33 years now of this path. And I've never met anyone. And I mean, I worked with gang kids. I worked in, all these things that fundamentally did not want some way to be a good person, to be able to look in the mirror and feel good about who they are. I mean, it's our journey, right? Isn't it the journey of everyone? Whether it's a counselor, when you're going to counseling or therapy or spiritual path or whatever somebody's doing, there's always a trajectory of trying to actually learn to be okay with who you are. And that's just a fundamental human nature. And in that quest, as humans, we do a lot of stupid things and we label things. And instead of finding worthiness and value, we find discontent and blame, and we get confused. And out of that confusion, we create a lot of karma. And out of that karma, we create misperceptions and labels, and then we create a cycle of discontent and this thing we call samsara, conditioned existence, always through my own lens, perceiving what I see as real and truth, instead of subjective and relational. And instead of asking what's the most beneficial thing to do for the most concerned, I tend to think about how I think things ought to be. And clearly my judgment is sharp, on target. And if I was running the show, we'd do things this way. So that's this thing that we want to start working with as we think, well, why would I want to really wish the very best for someone who I perceive as an enemy? Because it'll improve the world. And it'll help your mind awaken. Yeah, that's a pretty good reason. What we're not doing is encouraging harmful behavior. That's not what we're doing. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is put somebody in prison because we want the best for them. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is have boundaries. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is stand in front of a protest with a sign. That could be a very compassionate thing. So nothing here is willy-nilly or passive. There's nothing passive about Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., the Buddha, my teachers. Nothing passive about them at all. I've actually stood on the corner with Geshe Gelsen with a sign in front of a Chinese consulate. But you know what there was never in his mind? Is anger. Never anger. That's an enemy. The real enemy is there. It's not out there. And so that's the confusion. So as we enter into this next phase of transforming adversity, we get to recognize that people that we're challenged by are actually a great potential to move us out of complacency and into action in our own mind streams to be of true benefit. So I'm going to do this a little bit in reverse, since we're entering it this way. Rather than tell you what they want you to do, it says, having engaged in this mind training, we can recognize that a person who has harmed us thereby kicks us out of our complacency and pushes us into practice. And that's key, because you know what else? I've never met someone that I felt really didn't want to be a good person. You know what else I've never met? Any serious practitioner that didn't come here because they were happy. I mean, people don't come here because they're happy. It just doesn't work like that. When we're happy, you know what we're doing, right? We're planning our next vacation. We're not looking at our minds. We're not looking at our labels. Complacency does not breed a spiritual path. When we look at adversity in our life, that's what pushed us to grow. So I've never met, sometimes people go to a Dharma talk out of some interest. Oh, that's kind of interesting. But as far as actually digging in and going to the path and eliminating mental afflictions and finding liberation, no, you've noticed some suffering. You'll get here for the long haul. If we are surrounded by friends, our mental distortions may rarely be triggered, and we can easily exaggerate our sense of progress. But when hostility triggers animosity, it is like a bucket full of cold water in the face, making it very clear that we have something here to work on. Yeah. It's pretty easy to be all spiritual and chill, and It's all going my way. But man, when I find out I got some bad news or something else, then yeah. So that was always my friend Mark Maloney. A story where he met, so Matthew Ricard is this incredible monastic. He's a meditator for, I don't know, 40 or 50 years, guys. Himalayas, he's the real deal. He's the guy they hook up all the tests and, notice what has happened in a mind that's on compassion. So my friend Mark, goes to this conference with him a few times, and he gets with him the next time, and Matthew says to him, so Mark, how's your loving kindness practice going? How's your metta? My friend Mark says, my friend Mark's a great guy. Doesn't speak a lick of English, but he's a great guy. That Australian language, it's odd. But he says, my metta practice, it's great. It's going really well. Then Matthew Ricard says, yeah, how's it going with the people you don't like? They're just so sharp. Just boom. And then, Mark goes, well, there is this one guy. He goes, yep, that's your practice. Go do that. Because we don't know. When things are pretty good, it's pretty good. Well, how about that? Oh. Yeah, how about that? So, when someone harms us or otherwise repels us, we can simply say, this will pass. And distract ourselves with happier thoughts, turning our minds away. But this leaves us no less vulnerable the next time around. Right? Anger will come and go, I didn't react, just let go, it's no big deal. But the next time that happens, there's still a condition for anger to arise. I haven't looked at what's the real source of my anger. Suppose, for example, that Joe is a particularly arrogant person who rubs us the wrong way. We avoid having anything to do with him. So you just try to avoid him. After a while, he changes jobs or moves away. And we have no more contact with him. Joe gradually fades from our mind and no longer triggers our hostility. Now Jack appears, and he is just as arrogant. Exactly the same thing happens because nothing has been learned. Right? So that's kind of the misperceiving game that we play. Like, if I just get the right job, if that person would just quit, I have a new boss. That if, my life is just so reactive to what's going on there, I forget that the real source is here. It's not out there. Those are triggering something, and they're triggering these afflicted states that are based in misperception. So seeing clearly is the real liberator of that. Seeing clearly. What Jack and Joe are doing is offering us an opportunity for self-knowledge, and at the same time providing an impetus for putting this training into practice. We can meditate authentically on the kindness of the very person who harms us and cultivate our awareness of this. So here you could see where transforming adversity into the past really makes sense, right? Joe and Jack are now my kind, beneficial teachers, allowing me access to the source of my mentally afflicted states. They're letting me know I've got stuff to work on. I'm misperceiving things. And now they become enemies, or do they become something else? The kindness of a service rendered or a gift, large or small, is a limited kindness. It may ease our suffering temporarily, but it does not render our minds less vulnerable to suffering. The greatest kindness another person can show us is to help transform our minds so that contentment arises more readily from the nature of the mind itself without a pleasant stimuli. Now, wouldn't that be cool? resting in contentment, in peace, serenity, engaging in things in a state of equanimity that sees things more clearly and not so reactively. A Dharma teacher or spiritual friend can do that. So he's making a point. Somebody gives you a gift or makes you feel good, gives you flowers, chocolate. That's a good thing. Black liquor is not a bad thing. But it feels good. It's nice. But you're still susceptible to getting angry. Or even, wondering why you didn't bring any chocolate the next time. Or, those things don't last. Those conditional things don't last. And the contentment that arises is contingent upon that thing happening. And that thing doesn't happen, then I don't get that feeling. Whereas a Dharma teacher, that's a very different thing. So what he's making the point is that Jack and Joe are our Dharma teachers. More precious than a box of chocolate. By the way, there's 2 get 1 free chocolate bars at City Market. I got 3 for Laura. Yeah, I might get a taste. 2 get 1 free. Yeah, it's a good deal. I got the sea salt flavored. Selfishly, I would have gone caramel, but I remembered the practice. And I know she's not a big caramel fan. So we went that route. I did start to think, 2 salt and 1 caramel. You know what I mean? That mind was working the angle for a minute. A Dharma teacher or spiritual friend can actually do this other thing, provide us to the nature of our mind and develop that sense of contentment. Our enemies can as well. They show us the truest innermost kindness. And without them, the teachings of books and spiritual friends are insufficient for our spiritual growth. We need these people. They serve an indispensable role in our lives. And what do they get out of it? Nothing at best. They receive no benefit from the act of giving us harm, and if they are doing something really unwholesome, they get nothing but misfortune. They actually get pain and suffering. There is ground here for both gratitude and compassion. So that's the understanding with which to engage in this practice. The practice he's suggesting is Tong Lin for your enemies. Tong Lin is where you breathe in their suffering and pain into your heart and you give all your virtue and kindness to them. Which obviously would be very difficult to do without a greater context that we've been elaborating on. To recognize that they're actually showing us an incredible amount of benefit, and they are more than likely going to be suffering for many lifetimes. So it gives gratitude and compassion. So that's the conditions from which apparently next week, or the week after next week, we'll do this practice of Tong Lin. Visualizing. We won't always go right to the worst person. It's nice sometimes. I was trained, to kind of work your way up to that. Setchupua, he's saying go right to the worst person. But I've also received teachings from His Holiness and my teacher where you start with somebody who kind of irritates you a little bit. That precious teacher at work or that you're engaged with, and then start there. But I do invite you this week to watch how we label people. Are we separating us from them? Are they different than us? Are they just like us, trying to find their way, confused, making mistakes, trying to find some happiness? And where is the skillful way to engage with them? And there are skillful ways to engage, usually, not everybody. But I've had the really good fortune of engaging with many such people on a very different view than I have. Yeah. One last story, then we'll do our prayers. I like this story. Might even be true. I was traveling through Oregon. I was a Buddhist monk traveling by myself, going to see someone. And stopped in a place to get a burrito. And I'm a Buddhist monk, bald head, fit right in. And ordered my thing, and this big old lumberjack guy. He looks at me and goes, "So what the hell are you?" I said, "Well, I'm a Buddhist monk." Went over and I shook his hand, and rather than get offended, it was like, "Yeah, I'm a Buddhist monk, like the Dalai Lama. Are you familiar with who the Dalai Lama is?" I don't know no Dalai Lama. Oh, well, he just got a Congressional Medal of Honor. George Bush just gave it to him. And he perks up. George Bush? Yeah. Well, that's kind of interesting. We need more people. I think he's a Sarah Palin fan, so he got on this whole Sarah Palin thing. And then he just tells me, that Barack Obama, he's just ruining our country. He's just ruining our country. This is all happening in a matter of just a few minutes. And but now we've got a dialogue. Because, we're solid. Even if I am wearing a dress. And I asked him, I said, "Well, that's interesting. Do you think that, that was Barack Obama's plan, that he was going to grow up, make his way through to becoming president so he can actually destroy our country? Do you think that's his plan? Or, is it possible that, from his point of view, he's actually trying to do something helpful, but maybe it's just not working out the way, you'd like?" Now, this guy I had not met more than 5 minutes, who was on polar opposites of this sort of way of thinking, I think initially, politically at least. You know what he said to me? He goes, "No, that makes sense. Makes kind of sense. He's probably just doing what he can." How does that happen? How did two of us from very different things, within 5 minutes, have a conversation that became rational and honored each other? And I'm going to suggest it came from treating him as someone who is valuable and worthy of my attention, and not being offended when he interacted with me in a way that some might be offended by, right? And it's not that I'm any great saint or anything. He was just a lot bigger than me. Figured that would be a good way to go, But that tactic has worked, in my own personal experience many times. That's why I get to go to very conservative areas and talk at Rotary clubs with a bunch of people with very different views than me. And they still give me breakfast afterward, which is pretty cool. So this week I just thought I really wanted to spend, because I was watching the news, I was watching my own arisings with it, and I thought, rather than just launch into bringing those difficult people to mind and wishing them well, we really want to understand why we're doing this and why it's necessary right now. It's very necessary right now. We are the environment. How we treat each other is the environment, and we can be an example of that environment skillfully, So now we will do our prayers for all those. We have some names, it looks like, on the plate of people who need some prayers, and you may bring to mind some people that need some prayers. This conversation might have brought up a few. And so we'll recite one mantra's worth of Om Mani Padme Hums. Really wishing the best for those that are struggling. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Okay, just a couple of quick announcements and we'll do our dedication. Yeah. One is Sunday, we'll have a day long in here really to establish meditation practice. So we'll have a meditation day long retreat focusing on shamatha practice. I think that's something like 10 to 4:30, and so there's some flyers on that. There's still a little bit of room left. People are signing up. And then in November, our Juanita retreat, the Juanita Hot Springs retreat on compassion. It's a 3-night retreat. It's already starting to fill up. I know November sometimes seems like a far time away, but last time it filled up a few months ahead. And so far, and if you're watching online, Durango is representing. So we've got like 12 people already signed up. 10 of them are from Durango, and only a couple from here. So so if you're thinking about that retreat, and you online, just register as soon as you can, because what happened last 6 months ago was people just put off, and then there wasn't a room. So anyway, please, don't hesitate. It'll be great to have the Durango and Gunnison folks. I know you're listening. Sign up. You live right down the road. It'd be good to have you there. Okay. And so Saturday, normal routine, and Sunday we'll have a day long here.
And Monday, Chris is offering a whole day of meditation the day before the
Yeah, if you like, because of the solar eclipse, so
okay.
I'm going to be here doing some practice. Combined 9 to 3 is when the actual, 9:45 to 9:46 to 3:04 is when the solar eclipse is. So we're going to make sure we're doing a good amount of beneficial and wonderful positive practice on that day. So feel free to.
That's in the evening.
That's in the day.
Day 9:30 to.
About 9 to 3. So.
Okay. All right. So during the day on Monday.
And come by any time. It doesn't have to be like all day or anything like that. Pop in whenever. So.
All right. Okay. Thanks for
Sure.
kicking it in. Thanks for offering that. So that's Monday, an auspicious day. And you can also just check our calendar. We have a bunch of things on there. Apparently, I should check it.
Sorry, we didn't get that far yet.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Communications.
That's great of you to offer. All right, we'll do our dedication. And let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. We dedicate it for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use this collective effort to bring love, kindness, compassion, wisdom into our daily interactions, especially now in this time of challenge and division, that we can be a path of unification, of connection, and dedicate the merit and wisdom to our own awakened mind, allowing us to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. All right, thank you all for joining us today and for joining us online. Be well, as usual. Try to stay out of trouble. And I'll see you when I'm looking at you.